Hi there, Steve here again. Day 73, I think, or 74. I can't remember. I should check it before I start my video. Didn't do much today. Mostly I listened and watched in Russian, mostly listened because the whole situation in the Ukraine is so fascinating. All the politicians there, they're all, well, I'll get back to that later. But did a bit of Korean. And, I tried to go back to my whole, consolidating thing, but I just have trouble listening to and reading content that has no meaning. So I'm back to my podcast. And I'm just resigned to the fact that it's going to take a long time. And if I think of it, Russian I listened to and I read for 5 years. Czech was a year and a half. Um, Romanian was 3 months, but I wasn't, I didn't get that far, but it would have been faster. Um, I think with the Ukrainian, I read through the book there, and I can't learn words in the boring content that's there. If I were a total beginner to Slavic languages, then I'd spend more time with it. Now I'm really looking for words. I got a sense of how the verbs, conjugate and so forth. So I'm going back to my interesting content. But I think if I were to spend, as much as I do that, I know in listening to Ukrainian that to get to where I can really understand it, it would still be months and months, maybe 4 or 5, 6 months. There is no shortcut. Maybe that's the message. There is no shortcut. And Korean is going to take me another at least 6 months of what I'm doing now to get to what I call an educated person's level in Korean. There are no shortcuts. I can try to get so that I can converse on topic A, but that's not really meaningful in terms of my goals. So I'm just resigned to the fact that it's going to take me that long. The biggest problem, because there are no shortcuts, the biggest problem in language learning is time. Now, unless of course you have a very limited goal, just be able to say a few things and fine. But to really understand what people are saying, to be able to enjoy the culture, it takes time. Now that I'm into Ukrainian, people are saying, well, you should also learn Polish, and of course I should. So now I'm thinking that my wife and I, we should go travel in Poland and Ukraine. And I guess Polish, based on Russian and Czech now, and a little bit of, not really, but if I were to do some Ukrainian and then Polish, I mean, I think in a year I could have those to where, I could operate. However, this other couple and my wife and I are planning to go to Vietnam next spring. And I wanted to get going on Vietnamese and see if we could encourage people to create content for Link in Vietnamese. So, it's just there isn't enough time. I don't understand people who say, gee, I was with this fellow the other day who's been a very successful businessman, and he still goes to his company. He's 70 years old, and he's sold his company. And he said, gee, I don't know what I'm going to do when I retire. Like there isn't enough time in the day. I can't read the books that I want to read in English on history and stuff like that I buy. I've got my sporting activities, my family. I want to travel with my wife, and I want to learn all these languages. There's not enough time. How can you worry about what you're going to do when you retire? I don't understand. But you see this sort of path here. For the longest time, of course, I learned Chinese, right, and then Japanese. So that was, and I call that the Sinic, Sinic. Even though Japanese is a different language system from Chinese, it's not a Sino-Tibetan language. However, it's part of the Chinese cultural world. So within that Chinese cultural world, you've got Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and Vietnamese. And I gather that Vietnamese, just like Japanese and Korean, shares a lot of vocabulary with Chinese, although pronounced a little differently. So that's my Chinese world, call it Sinic, Sinic world. And for the longest time, I was very much into my Romance languages world. And if you take Spanish and Portuguese and Italian, and French, of course, and I've also toyed with the idea of learning Catalan, but I can read Catalan. It's that close, and similar with Gallego, I can read it. So there you've got the Romance world, which is actually, after all, 750 million people. That's quite large. The Cynic world is larger. It's 1.5 billion people, or whatever the number is. And then, of course, I did my German and Swedish, so call that the Germanic world, which is not as large. And now I've been in the Slavic world with my Czech, and I went to Slovakia and discovered that I could understand some, and I could read the signs, so there. And of course, my Russian, which started it all and which is the biggest chunk of the Slavic world. There are apparently 250 million Russian speakers, probably 100 and, if there's 140 in Russia, I don't know what the population of Belarus is, 5 or 10 million. And then in Ukraine, native speakers of Russian is probably half the population, so that's another 20 million. So there's probably 170 million native speakers, but then if you include all speakers of Russian, it's probably like 250 million. And then you throw in Polish and then the native Ukrainian speakers and the people who speak the South Slavic languages. I don't know what it all adds up to, but that's got to throw another 100 million people on there. So there's 350 million Slavic language speakers. And of course, with each of these languages, you get interested in the history, the culture, you want to travel there and stuff like that. So there's lots to do. There's lots to do. I want to stay with my Korean. I want to do the Vietnamese. I want to go back to Chinese. I still love my French, my Spanish, my Japanese. I mean, there's just no shortage of stuff to do. But I got to block all of that out and somehow go back to the Korean. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to phone my friend Mr. Choi at our golf club, who speaks in some strange regional pronunciation, but still, maybe suggest that we have lunch a couple of times a week. Maybe I'll play golf with him. And if he humors me and speaks to me in Korean, we will see. Okay, now I'm going to go watch the Canucks. I've got the game recorded downstairs. Finished dinner and the dishes. And talk to you later. Bye.